Okay, so let's go ahead and get back into our coverage over the Avengers. It has technically been a minute, not a long one, but we were covering Kurt Busiek and also George Perez's run on the Avengers like almost every other video. So I kind of want to go ahead and get back into our coverage over the Avengers. Now, we're going to cover another two-part story arc where we see the Avengers kind of go through a massive change. But before we're able to technically see that massive change, we have to dive into Avengers issue number 26, which at first it does seem like we are going to see a new Avengers team being put together by Steve Rogers. Because in our last video, we had talked about the idea of, well, the public no longer being on the side with the Avengers. Because in our last few videos, we have seen the public basically say, like, hey, the Avengers are no longer that team of heroes that we look up to. Because the main problem right now for the public is that the Avengers don't have anybody of color on their team. And technically, that is true. Now, in my last video, I had somebody kind of point out a few characters they saw on the team in the last few videos. The thing is, those characters weren't technically part of the Avengers. Like, for example, when it comes to Black Panther. Black Panther was only there for like a brief moment, and then he went back over to Wakanda. And so when it comes to the Avengers, no, they don't have anybody on their roster that's technically someone of color. Now, also to the public, they want the mutants off their team. So, for example, the Scarlet Witch, or even like Firestar, they want them off the team as well. Now, this is also kind of coming out of the idea of the triune understanding. Now, the Triune Understanding is this organization in Marvel Comics who have promised the public that their main goal is to help people reach the peak versions of themselves. So, for example, there is a character known as Anflon. Now, he was somebody who went through the whole organization and came out in this peak version of himself and technically turned himself into a superhero. But the problem is that for the Avengers, they kind of feel like the Triune Understanding is hiding things from them, like possibly working with some enemies of theirs that Kurt Busiek and George Perez had introduced in their run so far. And so for the Avengers, they're kind of like surrounded by all this hatred. Like the public is no longer trying to work with the Avengers. They're constantly protesting outside Avengers Mansion. And so when it came to Steve Rogers, he felt like the right move was to leave the Avengers, to allow someone else to go to the team as the leader to lead the team against the Triune Understanding. And so as we dive into Avengers issue number 26, we pick up with a character known as Maria de Guadalupe Santiago, now better known as Silverclaw. Now, when it comes to her character, she is technically an exchange student who came over to America, and her sponsor is, well, Jarvis. Now, is her right now at her school just watching the news about how they're talking bad about the Avengers. And because she knows the Avengers so well, she knows what the public is saying right now, and more the media, is all a bunch of lies. Now, out of nowhere, there's a knock on her dorm room door, and some guy hands her a note. That note comes somebody to tell her to meet them on the top of a bridge. Now, we do shift over to Carol Danvers. And around this time in Marvel Comics, in the 1990s, her code name was technically Warbird. Now, when it came to Carol Danvers in the 1990s, she became an alcoholic. Now, there was a storyline that we did not cover that took place over in Iron Man issue number 24. Now, with that issue, she got drunk, got mad at Iron Man, and tried to attack him. The problem was that when it came to their battle, they hit a plane that was flying by. Now, you did have Iron Man and Warbird work together to make sure the plane did land safely. But the problem is that now for Carol Danvers, she has to answer for her crimes. And so we see her currently in we currently see her on trial right now in a courtroom. Now, in the middle of the trial, the judge does get a message. And then she passed that message over to Carol Danvers. And just like Silverclaw, somebody is asking Carol Danvers to meet them on a bridge. And the same thing goes for Scott Lang as well, who's also the current Ant-Man around his time in Marvel Comics. He gets a message that says, hey, meet me at top of the Brooklyn Bridge midnight. So of course he goes there. And so once you do have all the different characters being able to meet up on top of the Brooklyn Bridge, they're then confronted by Captain America. Now, this is Steve Rogers telling the new heroes here, like, listen, I'm putting together a new Avengers team to go after the Triune Understanding because he feels like they're really hiding something from the public. But the problem is that he has no idea what they are currently hiding from the public. And so his main goal is to use this team to break into their new headquarters they have in New York. But also, he's like, listen, I can't use the old Avengers team because that team was not really put together to go on stealth missions. But also, the public is always watching that Avengers team. So if they get caught on this kind of mission, that hurts their image even more. But this team right here is built on the idea of going on a stealth mission. You guys are great on stealth missions. We should be able to get in and get the heck out without anybody noticing. If we do get caught, we'll try our best to make sure that we are labeled as not connected to the main Avengers team. Now, that is when you have our heroes being confronted by Janice Vale, the latest Captain Marvel. Now, around this time in Marvel Comics, when it came to this Captain Marvel, he was wearing the nega bands. Now, I'm not going to sit down and try to explain the whole idea of the bands. Just know that with the nega bands, he's also connected to, well, Rick Jones. And so they kind of share a body together in a way. But when it comes to Captain Marvel, he kind of feels like there's something big going to happen here in this area. And the reason why, because he has cosmic awareness. Now, when it comes to Rick Jones, he does inform Captain Marvel like, hey, let's not forget, your cosmic awareness has not been working properly. But for Captain Marvel, he believes that technically this time his cosmic awareness is working properly. He feels like something is going to pop off very soon. And so he also joins this brand new Avengers team. Now we have to switch over to a character known as Jonathan Tremont. Now for Jonathan, he is the supposed leader of the Triune Understanding, and we currently see him right now in Hawaii going out of his way to bring more people to his organization, more people to follow him. Now, we also kind of get the idea that for Jonathan, he's not technically human. Now, when it comes to Kurt Busiek and also George Perez, they don't really tell us the actual origin of this character because unfortunately, we're not going to learn everything about him until like Avengers issue number 50. But you did switch over to Manhattan, because we do see the new Avengers team that was put together by Steve Rogers being able to break into the Triune Understanding's new headquarters in New York. Now, when they do, they find this device known as a will suppressor. Apparently, it has the ability of a psychic broadcast device that will throw an invisible web over all of Manhattan, capturing every mind in the city and turning them into nothing more than slaves of the Triune. And so it's basically Steve saying this is why the public is right now going against the Avengers. And so his goal right now is to go out of his way with his brand new team and destroy this new device. Now, the way Steve Rogers is smiling, you can kind of tell right off the bat that this is not Steve Rogers. Now, before we're able to like properly learn what's going on when it comes to, well, Steve Rogers, we switch back over to Jonathan. Now, when it comes to Jonathan, it's him right now getting a call from one of his people. And this guy's all like, hey, listen, it's great that you have the media and also the public going against Steve Rogers. But here's your problem, though. Like, they're not talking about us though. And so for Jonathan, he's all like, don't worry, because sooner or later, you're going to have the media and also the public begin the process of talking more about the Triune Understanding. And so when we do switch back over to Steve Rogers, we learned that it's not Steve Rogers. It's technically Taskmaster who was pretending to be Steve Rogers. Now, here is the reason why. Because Taskmaster is technically working with the Triune understanding. And it gets even worse because while you had this new Avengers team battling against Taskmaster and being able to, well, technically defeat him, we do see Jonathan call on another character. And now will be Templar. Now, remember, we don't know much about Templar just yet, but with him calling Templar, he's saying, listen, I need to borrow your powers. And of course, you have Templar give Jonathan his powers. And what you have happen next is that once you have Jonathan appear, he blows up the entire building. Now, once you do have the Avengers wake up, this begins the process, making things even worse for our Avengers team. And the reason why, because when they do wake up, they're surrounded by cops, reporters, and also Jonathan, the leader of the Triune understanding. Is him right now trying to paint a picture that the Avengers had gone out of their way to blow up the building that he had just got done building in New York. It's the Avengers who are continuing to come after the Triune understanding. And so once again, it's the image of the Avengers being dragged through the mud. And technically, even though these characters are not part of the main Avengers team, they're still heroes. And some of them still have connections to the main Avengers team. So thanks to this whole storyline right here, the name of the Avengers had once again been dragged through the mud. It's the public, the media just eating what Jonathan is handing out to them. But when we transition into Avengers issue number 27, we're really picking up with, well, Dwayne. Now remember, Dwayne is a liaison for the Avengers. He works for the government. We also learned that he's technically part of the whole organization, the Triune Understanding. And for Iron Man, once he had learned that Dwayne is part of that organization, for Iron Man, he's now been kind of keeping a close eye on Dwayne. Now, for Dwayne, his main goal at the moment is to turn around the image of the Avengers, because in our last video, you had Thor attack reporters when they began to ask him different questions about the Avengers in a more negative way. And so because he did that, that one scene of him attacking reporters is being replayed over and over again. But also for Dwayne, he reminds us that for the protesters outside, they want to see a change in the Avengers. First off, they want no mutants on the team at all. But on top of that, they want to bring some color to the team. Now, I will admit this. When it came to Kurt Busiek and also George Perez run the Avengers, when they announced the first actual team on their run, I was kind of like, yo, man, diversity is kind of low here. But at the same time, as a comic book reader who knows the Avengers so well, I already know that sooner or later, things are going to turn around. We're going to see a different roster, most likely, with people of color on the team. Just give it some time. But in reality, right now, in this story arc, when it comes to the public, they're kind of like, no, we want change now when it comes to the Avengers team. Now, for Dwayne, he does get a tad bit lucky here, because for Justice and also Firestar, they are announcing the fact that they are leaving the team. And for Justice and also Firestar, they're both mutants. Now, here's the thing, because for me, I kind of hate this. And here's the reason why, because for Justice and also Firestar, I kind of love their character development when it came to Kirk and George working on these characters on their run on the Avengers. Because at first, you have both Firestar and Justice trying to fit in with the Avengers. By this point, they had begun the process of perfectly fitting in with the rest of the team. But now they're leaving. And the reason why? To focus on their relationship. Now, you also have Wonder Man also leaving the team as well to kind of deal with his own problems. Now, technically, there is a miniseries that does focus on Wonder Man around this time. The problem is that I can't find those books anywhere. But when it comes to Dwayne, he's loving the fact that two mutants are off the team right now, and Wonder Man is also leaving. But now his focus is adding a black person on the team, or at least somebody of color. When it comes to Iron Man, he overhears Dwayne saying that to himself, but under his breath. And so for Iron Man, he does get pretty upset about the idea that for Dwayne, the only reason why they're going to add someone onto the Avengers is based off their skin, or based off their religion, or based off their culture. And for Iron Man, that's not okay at all, because for the Avengers, they are a group of characters that came together who wanted to protect the world. And that's technically it. They're not going out of their way to recruit somebody so that they can hit their checklist when it comes to having diversity on their team. Now, while you do have Iron Man and Dwayne kind of go back and forth, Jarvis walks into the room. And when it comes to Jarvis, it's really more him informing the real Avengers about what happened in the last chapter. Now, of course, they do realize that the other Avengers are the so-called Avengers, Ant-Man, Warbird, Silver Claw, and also Captain Marvel, that they were tricked by Taskmaster, who was pretending to be, well, Captain America. But once you do have the Avengers hear about that, you did have Dwayne say, listen, I had invited Jonathan over to Avengers Mansion, the leader to the Triune Understanding. But you did have Dwayne shift his focus over to Thor. Because again, when it comes to Thor, the dude did attack a reporter who was just doing their job, asking them questions about the team or how the public feels about the team. And for Thor, he hates the idea of the name of the Avengers being dragged through the mud. And so when it comes to Dwayne, he tells Thor, you have to go out there and apologize for what you did. Now for Thor, he's kind of like, I ain't gonna do that. There's no way you're gonna force me to go out there and apologize for something that I feel like I did nothing wrong. And so for Thor, he then leaves the Avengers. So just like that, they had lost another member to their team. This roster is going through a big change. And speaking of changes, you also have, well, the Wasp and also Giant Man join the team and kind of help fill in the open spaces on the Avengers roster. Now for Dwayne, he hates the idea of the Wasp and also Giant Man being there because now they're adding 2 more white people onto the team. Nobody of color. Now, we also see here, you have the Avengers going out of their way to call up different people who are basically superheroes, but people of color. Now, of course, they get no's left and right. Like, for example, Falcon. Now, when it comes to Falcon, when he had first joined the Avengers, even back then, you had the government try to force Falcon on the team to add someone of color to their team. And so for Falcon, he hates the idea of once again being forced by the government to be on the team to add some color to the current Avengers roster. Now, when it comes to Iron Man, what he wants to do is kind of add Carol Danvers to the team. And the reason why, because to kind of help her begin the process of turning her life around. Because remember, at this point in time in Marvel Comics, she had just became an alcoholic, but also she almost killed off a plane full of people. And so for Dwayne and Iron Man, they kind of agree the best thing for Carol Danvers is to be on the Avengers and not be locked up for the crimes that she had committed. But with all those different moving pieces going around when it comes to the Avengers roster, we did see Jonathan Tremont appear. Now remember, he is the leader to the Triune Understanding. And so this is Dwayne wanting the Avengers to at least talk to him to begin the process of like, getting rid of the bad blood between both parties. The problem is that as soon as Jonathan does appear near Avengers Mansion, you didn't have a bunch of protesters who are technically part of some kind of anti-mutant organization and wanting to attack the Avengers Mansion. Now, luckily for our heroes, another hero does appear, and that would be Triathlon. Now, in an earlier video, I had somebody say like, hey, wasn't he part of the Avengers? No. This begins the process of him officially joining the Avengers for the first time, because in earlier story arcs, he would just appear here and there and then disappear for a few more story arcs. Now it's time for him to become an official member of the Avengers. But here's the problem though, because when you do have the Avengers go back inside Avengers Mansion, you have Iron Man and also Dwayne begin to argue with one another. And the reason why? Because of triathlon, the idea of him officially joining the Avengers. Now, no one on the Avengers said yes. It's Dwayne kind of forcing him onto the team. But for Iron Man, he does not want him on the team at all because for triathlon, he's also part of the triune understanding. And so for Iron Man, it's more of him saying, you are now inviting the possibility of a spy from that organization into our organization. That right there is not okay. Now, for Dwayne, he does get very upset by that statement. And the reason why, because for Iron Man, for the Avengers, they don't have any kind of evidence that the triune understanding is some kind of evil organization. And so now it's him saying, here you are right now, with me giving you a chance to add somebody of color to your team. But right now, you thought it'd be a good idea to say no to him because who he works for. That right there is not okay. You are officially judging somebody without even giving them a chance. Now, it's also Dwayne saying, if you don't allow triathlon onto the Avengers, I will use my power in the government to shut this team down, to make sure this world will never again see the Avengers. And so for Iron Man, he's kind of like, fine. I will allow him on the team. Now, for triathlon, he heard the entire argument. He will join the Avengers, but to only prove to them that he's not somebody evil, that he's somebody they can possibly trust. Now, for Wasp, she also gets another call. And we learn here that She-Hulk is now officially going to join the team. So now you have She-Hulk, you have Iron Man, Giant Man, the Wasp, Triathlon, Scarlet Witch, and also Miss Marvel or Captain Marvel, Warbird. The girl has so many different nicknames. Oh my lord. But either way, this is now your new official Avengers team. Now, before we do close off on today's video, we jump over to South America, and this kind of begins the process of us getting ready to cover the next story arc for the Avengers, where they had a character out known as Luis Ramirez. And the reason why, because he is now being surrounded by guys who are riding on the backs of giant birds. And this leads into the next storyline called The Death Song of Kulon Goth. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.